When is a game casual and when is it sweaty? So today's video is gonna be a little bit weird. We have a Reddit response, but I don't actually think I have the correct answer to it. I'm not really the arbiter for this particular kind of question. In fact, actually, one could argue by building within budget constraints, I'm actually being far more sweaty than other players because I'm trying to get a deck as optimal as I can in most situations with a very limited set of resources, which is not a casual mindset for a game. That's a min-maxing mindset. So let's take a look at the post and see what we can get to. This post comes from Agitated Analyst, and they said, "What makes something casual in EDH versus sweaty? My friend and I are in a discussion right now about what makes a deck and card competitive versus casual. My arguments have been that price and outcome are good indicators as to what makes a game lose its casual flair. They say, however, that it's how you play the cards. I disagree that how you play the card strictly defines how casual something is. At a certain point, to me, if you play a card off pace or hold playing a card to keep it casual, the deck isn't casual, and therefore it's not casual gameplay. It almost feels like you're getting toyed with. TLDR, my friend and I are debating what makes something casual. They say Rule Zero discussions define if something is casual, and I think it's deeper than that. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what we can do to answer this. There's a few ways we can look at this. One is that, well, Commander is a casual format, and I've seen people in my comment section say that even CEDH is casual, despite the amount of money that people spend on it in order to compete, and despite the way that people travel in order to go to tournaments where they spend several hours of their time, not unlike competitive Magic. Then again, I've also seen people in my comment section or in other videos that have said that Friday Night Magic tournaments are casual and not competitive, despite the fact that we are quite literally competing and there is a prize there, and the only difference between this tournament and a larger tournament is that the larger tournament will likely have better prize support and, like every other sales filter anybody has ever encountered, will have more powerful players. So I'm actually going to use the Magic the Gathering rules enforcement levels in order to show you what I mean. So the way a sales funnel works is at the top of the sales funnel, you have something that is supposed to attract a lot of people. That's right here. Let me go ahead and draw that on the whiteboard. Bop, bop, bop. So there is your opening for the sales funnel. Now, each and every level of the sales funnel works like a filter, where fewer and fewer people will make their way into it. So at the top right here, where we're looking right now, this would be your casual group of play. This is kitchen table Magic. This is your, random people you find on the street playing Commander. That's what this level is. But as you go down the levels, the rules enforcement levels actually increase. So once you get to a Commander or a Standard or a Modern tournament, you are now in the regular rules enforcement level. The expectation for this kind of play is that all play should be technically correct. So you're not going back on plays, you're not, doing any takesies, backsies, stuff like that. You are adhering to the rules as well as you can. And usually these kinds of rules are associated with a low level of prized play. However, as we go further and further into the sales funnel, we'll notice something, that we move to competitive play. And once we are in competitive play, these are any tournaments that have significant cash prizes or any invitations that are being given to any player there who performs very, very well. They have far stricter policies and procedures. For instance, if you're drafting at the competitive level for Magic the Gathering, then you have to do things like write every card you drafted down on a sheet of paper. It's tedious as all hell, and I actually kind of hate it. Anytime that I have done anything at this particular level, I've not been super happy when it's a sealed environment. That can be different when it's a 60 card play environment. That's going to be a different scenario entirely. Same level of rules enforcement, just a different level of tedium for everybody to deal with. However, these particular tournaments have to have stronger rules enforcement so that they can protect the integrity of the tournament structure for everybody there. For instance, if you let people do, takesies, backsies, and shit like that, then you're going to run into a problem where there's, $2,000 on the line, and who's really going to be the villain in that particular scenario. There's even a whole ass guide about infractions and what to do whenever a player engages in any particular kind of infraction. What do you do when a player misses a trigger? Well, in high-level play, that's considered just a missed trigger, and you don't get the effect of it. It is the player's responsibility to, keep that in mind. What do you do when somebody is tardy? What do you do when their deck list does not match what they brought to the tournament? What do you do when you find that somebody's marking their card sleeves or not shuffling their deck properly? What do you do when a player engages in bribery or wagering in order to try to make more out of the event than was intended by any of the organizers? What do you do when a player is stalling in order to keep a game win? For instance, if you have a 2 out of 3 game win scenario and you've won game 1 but you're stalling out game 2, we can definitely see that as you trying your best to win this game, not by the merits of your skill, but by playing very slowly so that you have one win and then a game tie, ultimately meaning you have a game win that you are moving to your next round with. But then as you move further into the funnel, you'll find that even fewer players are going to make their way into the professional level of the game. This is where players are playing for such major cash prizes that many of them will try to make a job out of this. Now, that's not really been as feasible lately for a lot of players, and whether that's a good or bad thing is certainly up for discussion in the comment section below. But the point is, there is already an existing structure of rules enforcement that we can use as a guideline. So the question becomes, what level of rules enforcement does Commander use? Well, I'd argue that we barely even get into regular rules enforcement even in Magic the Gathering tournaments for Commander. This would mean that technically, by how the game is ran, everything is casual unless we are at a major tournament. But that can't be right, because there are still things that really just make us feel like things have gone awry in a game of Magic the Gathering. So let's actually look further into the discussion and see if there's any insight we can pull, because by rules as written, competitive versus casual is entirely defined by how hard we're willing to enforce the rules. First comment on here is, casual is when I like something, sweaty is when something beats me. And, I've actually seen that sentiment a lot. So, like, if I bring my Sephiroth deck to a table and somebody loses their third permanent to me by, like, turn 6, we'll start getting conversations about whether something's casual, and I'm sorry, but no, if I can't bring that deck to a CDH table and perform well, that's a casual deck. I'm sorry, no. And likewise, we have the response here from Kestrel. Competitive is when I bring it to a CDH tournament. Casual is when I bring it to any other game. So if I'm super steel manning that, it seems like they're saying if a deck is viable in a CEDH tournament, then that makes it a competitive deck. But if a deck is viable in a casual game and not viable in CDH, then it's no longer a competitive deck. And you know what? I'm actually willing to agree. I actually agree with that statement. However, I think what's actually happening here is far more interesting than the question of whether something is casual or whether it's competitive. Before I get into that, though, I want to highlight a few more responses in here so that we can get a pretty holistic idea of how people are responding to this. So we have one from Robin here saying, I swear a ton of Magic players really don't like Magic. Commander players don't like Magic. Like, they actually don't enjoy the game and its mechanics at all. They enjoy some adjoining aspect, and Magic is just how they got there. And then they complain and whine incessantly about tryhards and sweaty ones, whatever. Fuck match play expectations, accept that people will enjoy things you do not, accept that the game may involve mechanics you personally dislike, accept that Magic, including the most casual of Commander, is still, quote, competitive, in the sense that somebody wins and somebody else loses, and then play or don't. Which the OP actually did end up responding saying, bro, I asked a question about what makes it sweaty. You have no idea how deep I am in this godforsaken game. I'm not whining. I'm just looking for a definition. Okay, so I actually agree with OP here, because this particular response, this kind of like abject... there's a correct way to enjoy Magic the Gathering, and if you don't enjoy it that way, then you're wrong and evil and bad. Like, no, I don't like that kind of response. And for the record, we actually see this kind of response a lot from enfranchised and new players. You get players who are very, very casual or very new, and they say that, like, that's the way you're supposed to enjoy Magic, as Richard Garfield intended. And if you don't play that way, then you're not playing the way that the game is supposed to be played. But then you get people on the opposite side of the spectrum that say that if you're playing with all of the best cards you can, then that's not in the correct spirit of the game. And, you know, you can't both be right, but you're both sitting at the same commander pod trying desperately to play with one another. So how do we get you two to have a good game, aside from just telling y'all not to play the game together and go find, you know, different pods? If I'm being honest, I think that the answer to OP's question, though, actually lies within the psychographics of the Magic the Gathering players themselves. So for that, we need to talk about Timmy, we need to talk about Johnny, and we've, of course, got to talk about Spike here. In short, Timmy players are the players that Magic the Gathering's design team makes cards for that are big, stompy, stupid, slow, and not very good. But the numbers are big, and we fucking love that shit. And there's a little bit of Timmy in me. I think that's why I love my Ruby and Catilda decks as much as I do. It's just dumb, big, stompy guys coming out and doing their thing. However, there's a problem. I can't fit this particular psychographic perfectly, because I'm not just trying to get those super stompy guys out, I'm trying to get them out in a particular way, and that is as fast and as efficiently as possible. And that's where we land with the Spike. So the Spike is trying to win the game at any rate possible, but they are specifically trying to make sure that they are playing as efficiently as they can. They are using the top strategies. They are using the best way to win the game. They are min-maxing everything to the nines. And I would argue that a lot of my decks are technically Spike decks, because they are an attempt to min-max within the confines of what I can do in, quote, casual budget Commander. Which kind of brings us to Johnny, who is, well, the player for whom Magic the Gathering is self-expression. It's not, I like big numbers herder, and it's not, I need to win. It's, I like Magic because my cards are an extension of me. Now, that sounds really cringy, but think about it. Think about it. What deck types do you lean into, and why do you lean into those deck types? Almost every player has a couple of playstyles that they really like to lean on. I, for instance, really enjoy Control. I love Control and Arch Enemy playstyles a lot in Magic, and that's definitely a bit of a stink that I've carried with me anywhere I go, but that is how I enjoy playing the game. I like being the 1v3 person. I like being the schemer. So for that, well, the psychographic profile for that is Johnny. Now, for Magic the Gathering design, every player has some combination of these three people. The Timmy, who desperately wants to get the big dumb shit out because it's fun, the Johnny, who really wants to win in their own creative way, and the Spike, for whom creativity needs to go completely by the wayside in order to win. So where am I going with all this? Well, ask yourself, which kind of player are you? And let's go back to the original conversation. What makes something casual in EDH versus sweaty? I would say that what makes something casual in EDH is a combination of being willing to have a Rule Zero discussion and pare your deck down, and it is how you choose to use those cards. It is both. I don't think that OP or OP's friend is entirely correct, but I also don't think either of them are incorrect either, because it is how you choose to play this game and how you choose to communicate what you're doing in Commander specifically that, well, it leads to you being either a casual player or a competitive player. Ask yourself this when you're building your deck and when you're sitting down at the table. What is your goal? If we accept these three psychographics, then a player is going to fall more or less into one of these categories. At least a higher percentage of their play patterns will. Either they want really cool, dumb things, or they want to win, but specifically their own way on their own terms, or they want to win at any cost. So what makes a deck sweaty? What makes a card sweaty? Well, let's look at Chatterfang. Let's see here. If you have Chatterfang, most people are going to say that this is a win at any cost commander. This is a commander that players use for infinite combos to the nines, because this thing can infinite with a ham sandwich. But there's three different ways that you can build this deck. If you're going dumb things chaos, then you may be building Chatterfang sort of squirrels tribally, because you really like squirrels. That's what you want to do. But this person who's building squirrels tribal, they may also end up taking this exact idea and running it, well, as more of a Johnny deck. They want to win with Chatterfang, but they desperately want to win their own way, so they're gonna win with squirrels. They're gonna play more efficiently than the Timmy player is going to, because for them, this is something that they want to win with, and it's how they want to win. But if you are the Spike player, what kinds of cards are you selecting? Well, you're likely going to be selecting something kind of like this. You're probably using things like Pitiless Plunderer, cards that go super infinite with Chatterfang, because to you, winning at any cost is what's necessary. You may not care about winning and find yourself in the Timmy section. You may care about winning, but you want that to be your primary goal, and that will be when you fall into the Johnny section. And you may care about winning, and that can be exactly what you're here for. You're here for the thrill of the game. You're here for players trying to annihilate you and you getting out at the skin of your teeth. That makes you a Spike. Now, make no mistake, each and every one of these players, they want to win. Each and every one of them has an onus to try to win the game. They are going to do their best in the game to try to win. But how they got there, how they built their deck, what they determined to do before they ever sat down at that table, that's going to be what is the big determining factor over whether that's casual or competitive. But we still haven't actually answered the question. We still haven't. So if it's not the player psychographics, because you can have a Spike who's competitive, but that Johnny player is going to be equally competitive. So, like, is every casual commander player a Timmy? No, I wouldn't say so. I consider myself a casual commander player, and I've certainly got a lot of Spike in my blood. So, well, it can't be the rules enforcement level. It can't be the player psychographics. So what is it? Where are we actually at in this discussion? And here's where I think you and the audience are going to have to answer this one for yourself. In my opinion, personally, there is no hard divide over what makes something casual and what makes something sweaty in Commander. Because if I bring one of my casual decks to a table of players who are newer or players who don't have very well-established decks or, have grabbed something off eBay, they're going to see my deck as hyper-competitive. If I then take that same exact deck and I take it to a CDH table, I'm not going to be doing jack shit. I'll be watching a game played. I might counter a singular spell, but then somebody will Thoracle the table, somebody will do Blue Farm, somebody will have Rogsai, somebody will do something that I will be unable to interact with because my deck is not stacked up for that particular environment. For that environment, my deck is not sweaty. It's very casual. And by comparison, my deck is going to feel super casual compared to the sweats at the CEDH players. But once I go down a bracket or two, my deck's going to feel far more competitive and sweaty than anyone else's deck because it is a controlled deck, and that does make people feel a certain type of way. So what makes a deck and a card competitive versus casual? I think it's a combination of all of these things. It's how hard you are willing to adhere to the strict rules of the game. That's an aspect of how sweaty a player you might be, how competitive a player you might be. The cards you choose in your deck, did you pick them because you thought they were neat and shiny? Did you pick them because you really want to win with a very particular combination of cards? Or did you pick them because they are the best at what they do? That also determines how sweaty of a player you are. But also, once we get down to play a game, the other decks at the table also have a factor. They also have weight into whether or not your deck is sweaty or your playstyle is sweaty. And yeah, I also agree that if a player has the win in their hand and they don't choose to take it, that's not casual, or is it sweaty? It's just toying with the players. We could just go to the next game. That's fine. And I'm not above it. I've done it too. I've certainly done my handful of toying with my food, but still, it's not really a factor here. Whether or not I choose to play a card in my hand in a sequence that wins the game, that's just down to how willing to be an asshole I am in a game, honestly. Realistically, what's casual versus sweaty is a giant gray zone that has a lot of different arguments for why something is casual, why something is sweaty, and it's almost all, well, vibes-based. It really is. And to be clear, I don't think that's a mistake. I don't think that that is a negative. I think that things can be really good without adhering to super strict definitions. What's casual and what's sweaty is going to be entirely based on player vibes, and, well, that's okay. I don't think that that's a bad thing. I don't think that there is a clear-cut answer to this. Now, there are obviously answers in the extremes, right? Obviously, the CEDH deck is a sweaty deck. Duh. It's a competitive deck. That's what it's supposed to do. Obviously, your Horses Looking Left deck is a casual deck. It's prioritizing theme and flavor far over whether or not it can win a game. But for everything in the middle, I think it's entirely down to why you chose the cards in your deck when you did, how strictly you're willing to be dealing with those rules, and most importantly, what level is every other deck at the table playing at? Because that's going to be a huge determining factor no matter what. You could be playing a precon, and somebody brings a starter precon, and then another person brings one of those slot decks from eBay, and none of you have made a single decision over what cards are in your deck, but the non-starter WotC precon is probably going to be the thing that runs away with the game more than anyone else because, well, that's part of its design. It's built to do that, whereas the starter precon's built to be slower, and the eBay precon, your results may vary. I don't think there's a solid answer to this, but I do think what we have is a pretty solid conversation. And I think if players are mostly spending time engaging in that conversation, they'll figure out what makes the most sense for their play group. They'll figure out what the vibes are. But it is just vibes. And I think trying to argue that there is one correct answer is kind of missing the forest for the trees. We have major examples of extremes that you can point to. Everything else in the middle, though, is where most of us sit. That's okay. But I do still want to know y'all's thoughts in the comments section below. For me, like I said, I think it's a gray area. I really, really do. I don't think there's a definitive answer here, and I'm not going to be the one that tries to tell you that I'm the arbiter of that. But I do want to know where everybody else sits in this particular conversation. So let me know in the comment section below. Hopefully I don't see anything weird there. And yeah, I'll see y'all in the next one. I've made the unfortunate mistake of making all fan art canon, and you guys use that to make a ton of doppelgangers of me that try to ruin my life. So why not go ahead and celebrate that cacophony by picking up the new channel playmat over on 4th Wall. When you pick up the playmat, take a picture and throw it up on social media tagging me so I can feature you in a future video.